Howdy, folks. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Hope y'all doing okay. So, I want to talk about something. And this shouldn't be political. It really shouldn't. It should be about smart decisions, about what actually works, about policy moving forward. So, there have been some residents of California that are giving Texas a hard way to go due to, on the internet and whatnot, just trash talking in groups and whatnot that, oh, look at Texas, they're blacked out now. And the first thing I thought when I heard about that, Texas having all these problems right now, is California's not one to talk. Every year they experience rolling blackouts and brownouts when it gets hot, and it gets hot in California every year. So they've known this since there's been the state of California generating and drawing electricity, and they don't do anything about it. And I've talked to people that lived in places where there was on and off peak rates for electric. Some neighbors of ours years back used to live in Arizona, and they offered really good off peak rates on electric. It was like a third of what it would cost during peak. So Arizona, summertime, hot. Now, I don't know if this was to prevent grid failure back then or not. They lived there years ago, and this was years ago when I knew them. So, you're talking 30, 40 years back, probably, at least 20 years back. So anyway, it was interesting because they said that, you could cool your house and everything off at night, and so they cranked their AC as low as it would go, just make it run here full time overnight, get it as cold as they could stand it, and then set it to like 80 during the day and run a fan in the room that they were in. And I don't know if that, like I said, I don't know if that was to prevent, issues with the power grid or not, but it was definitely, they were doing it just for the financial aspect of it because of how much cheaper it was for them to cool their house. Well, anyway, I don't understand people rejoicing in the misfortune of others. When the only thing that, the closest I've come to that in my mind, is when someone's doing something stupid and repeatedly doing something stupid, and you even tell them, hey, you're doing something stupid, this stupid thing will bite you right on the derriere if you keep it up. And sure enough, the stupid thing bites them. It's kind of the thing of, well, at least I was right. It's not like, oh, they're suffering, they're paying the consequences for their actions. It's like, well, I was right. So, but, a lot of times when I do that, it's my friends. And so, give you a case in point example. I didn't say anything to him about this, but a buddy of mine married a woman back in, good grief, 9-10 years ago. And I had mixed feelings about it. Like, I liked her, but they had some problems that I thought needed to be worked through before they said vows. My opinion. And from the voice of experience, you don't go into marriage with problems that, like, everybody can work on themselves, but you don't go in there with, like, huge problems and expect marriage to fix it. You can still work on your problems, but marriage itself won't fix the problems. Like, if you've got a huge jealous tendency or a huge anger management issue, that doesn't necessarily stop you from walking down the aisle, but getting married doesn't fix it. You've got to actually go to counseling or, put work in on it. Anyway, this buddy of mine, and I didn't say, like, I had talked to her a little bit in appropriate times, places, and manners, and, kind of tried to help her see certain aspects of things going on, and I talked to him like, I don't get her right now. And other people had actually kind of warned him about her, and turns out within a year, by their anniversary, they were divorced. They were separated before their 1 year anniversary, and they were the paperwork was filed by their anniversary date. So that was one of those things where it was nice to have my intuition and instincts affirmed about that, but I felt really sorry for my buddy because he was blaming himself for all of their problems, and this is one of those instances where it takes two to tango. So back to the Texas power grid, they're looking at a 1 in 110 year event as far as weather goes. Sorry, got thirsty. So, 1 in 110 years, granted, this is a huge inconvenience, going to cause a lot of people heartache, misery, possibly some death, and a ton of other issues, but you don't always prepare for that. You prepare for what you're going to deal with on a day-to-day basis. The apocalypse, whatever causes it, will probably eventually happen at some point. I don't drive around a Mad Max car. Money will probably be worthless at some point, one way or another, whether it's due to just inflation or another currency taking over or whatever. I'm not going to burn all the cash I've got. So you prepare for the day-to-day, and then, that's what you live with, is the day-to-day. So, I don't understand people rejoicing in Texas having a hard time. And I've listened to kind of both sides of this. Texas is, from my understanding, and I could be wrong on this, my understanding, one of the more energy diverse states. And from my understanding, it's actually the number one producer and consumer of wind energy. My understanding. I always leave that up because I could be wrong. I know that they also do solar, they also do nuclear, they also do natural gas. Now here's the issue. The solar and the wind energy allow them flex capacity where, and I think they can produce 25% of their electricity with wind. So that means that they can reduce their amount of dependency on consumable energy and use renewable energy. Cool. Okay? My take on it. Now, where this gets interesting is the turbines froze up, and anyone that knows anything about airplanes or has traveled on airplanes even to anywhere where there's winter weather, you've probably seen them spraying the planes with de-ice fluid. Hot fluid that melts the ice so the wings slice through the air and create the lift effect that you all learned about in elementary school. Well, the prop blades on a turbine work the same way, and as they become encrusted in ice, they aren't as efficient in the wind. So, I actually seen a picture of this. It was made into a meme. I didn't care about the meme. I just thought it was interesting. It's something I'd never thought about. When the prop blades on a wind turbine get ice, if you want to keep using that turbine, you've actually got to fly a helicopter out right next to the turbine and hose it with de-ice fluid. I didn't know that. I thought that was kind of cool. The second thing that happened is the solar panels got covered up in ice and snow, which can happen realistically. I mean, they're out in the elements. They're going to be a little warm from, turning solar radiation into electricity, but they're not going to be holding a bunch of thermal energy. So when you get those panels that cold, ice and snow will build on them. And then you run into the same problem where they're generating little to no electricity. So the solar energy dropped to, the wind energy dropped to like single-digit % of its total output. Texas, due to where it's located geographically and the temperatures that it typically sees, does not have to insulate its natural gas pipelines that they use to move natural gas to the power plants. One of the pipes froze. They lost some percentage of gas flow in the ability to generate electricity. Another thing that happened is there was a nuclear plant that got shut down due to all this. Now, it wasn't that the nuclear plant couldn't function in the cold. It wasn't, that the rivers froze and they couldn't get the water out. No, none of that. What had happened is a sensor on the nuclear power plant was sending a false reading into the nuclear control computer, and when it got a false reading due to the cold, because it iced over, it shut the plant down, and they're not going to run the plant without the safety sensor. What I understand about it. So the majority of the state's power presently is coming from coal and natural gas, my understanding. And so what's interesting is people are, Texas needs more windmills. Well, okay, suppose you had the ability for Texas to generate 50% of its electricity from wind, and this happened. Well, guess what? They're now the 100% of electricity that's being generated is still going to drop to 2%. So instead of being 2%, now you got 4%. It doesn't work. You could make an argument, and I'd probably listen to it, that you could add enough renewable energy, be it wind, solar, tidal energy harnessing, whatever, but always have enough emergency energy production capacity based on consumable fuel to kick in, and enough stockpile and capacity of consumable fuel to hold the state over for a couple months in an emergency, whatever that might be. That argument I like a lot better than we need to just, this bad thing happened, so we need to rely more on something that's not reliable. What's keeping the lights and the heat on in Texas right now, to the degree that it is coal and natural gas. So, I think it's so stupid that people are gloating over this when Texas is the state that's like the best at it, and it bit them in the butt. That's my take on it. I think it's stupid. I've never understood trying to make hay out of a crisis. I've never understood trying to make fun of those that are in bad situations. And here's the craziest thing about it. The people that are in Texas that are affected by this, you might have some of the people that disagree with every public policy that's going into place in Texas large scale right now that are just suffering there. You could have a California transplant that moved into Austin that's still suffering under all this. My opinion, but I just think it's stupid to gloat over Texas having energy problems right now. I think that what would be better to happen would be for relatively cheap long-term solutions and stopgap measures to be looked at. I don't necessarily buy into climate change 100%. I don't know what percentage of that I'm willing to attribute to mankind. I can tell you this much, it's way less than 50%. Because if you look back at historical weather records over time, the Industrial Revolution kicked off, call it 140 years ago, and we've been cataloging weather long before that, as best we knew how at the time. So what I think is interesting is we've been pumping this out for 140 years, and we've gotten way cleaner about it. But what's interesting to me is the planet was changing long before mankind was a whatever percentage contributor we are to it, if that makes sense. So I don't necessarily buy that we're affecting the climate in a massive way. We might be affecting it in a big way, but it's going to do, if everything that mankind did, if mankind got wiped out tomorrow, just, poof, every man is gone, the climate's still going to change on this planet. Without us doing anything, creating trash, creating carbon waste, burning fuel, pumping fuel out of the ground, whatever. The climate on this planet is still going to change. I don't know how much a percentage it would be different versus if we were around, if you could run, the side-by-side comparison, but I think that what needs to be being looked at is cheap retrofits to both the renewable energy and the consumable energy in Texas and in other states that would help with this measure. Give you a case in point example. A small electric heater that could keep the surface of solar panels at, say, 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Just keep the surface at 40 degrees, and even if it's snowing like crazy, it would just draw enough power out of the solar panels to keep it 40 degrees, no matter what, 40 degrees. Perhaps a wire mesh that goes inside that is put inside the blades of the wind turbines, the newer ones, that can draw some of the electricity from the wind turbine itself to heat the blades when the blades get to a certain cold temperature, same thing. And on that, since you've got the centrifugal motion of the blade spinning in a circle, you actually don't need it very warm. You just got to keep enough of a barrier of water on it where whatever frozen precipitation you've got, when it hits, it just gets slung off the end of it. You could also do something like a de-ice boot, which is done on airplanes, which is just a rubber bladder that is periodically filled up with a small amount of air pressure that will crack the ice on the leading edge of the wing, which is the most important edge of the wing or prop, and cause the ice to fracture, and then once it fractures, the wind can get in under it and pull the rest of it off enough where it's still effective. So that'd be another thing to look at in some of these renewables as a way to keep winter precipitation from rendering them inoperative. And I don't know how much any of what I've mentioned has cost, but I know that there has to be viable solutions out there, and if someone smarter than me is willing to pick up the responsibility and take an idea out to market like that, I'm sure there are companies that, if you got something like that patent, a way to effectively de-ice a wind turbine blade without using a lot of energy from the wind turbine, because it's there to generate electricity, not to keep its own blades clean. But if you could come up with a way to, with low energy consumption, do that, there'd probably be a lot of money in it for you if you could figure out how to make it work. Just saying. That's what I got. I'm done ranting. Sorry I went off on a couple tangents there, but people just need to be kind to one another. Catch y'all next time.